All right, everybody, we are live. You are back. It is the Jack Murphy Live podcast. This is Jack Murphy. You can find me on YouTube at Jack Murphy Live. You can find me on Twitter, Jack Murphy Live, at the website, jackmurphylive.com. The book is Democrat to Deplorable. Go to Amazon, pick that up today. The best explanation of what happened in 2016, and probably a great explanation of what's going to happen here in 2020. And today I have with me the one and only Amanda Milius. We've known each other now for a couple of years. And I got to tell you, I was surprised to find out some of your lineage, some of your heritage, all of the background and everything, because we just got introduced and we were just hanging out and it was great. But Amanda here has just released, or is about to, an amazing, powerful, important movie, a documentary called The Plot Against the President. Amanda is the writer and the director, and she's here with me today. Amanda, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me, Jack. It's awesome to see you on the interwebs versus hanging out at all the hangouts like we do.
We did. We spent many a time in the Trump Hotel at the various events all around town, and random backs of Ubers and cruising across the city. I mean, we've had some really fun times. And to be honest, like I said, I had no idea who your father was, what you were up to film-wise. At the time, you were just working for the administration. So why don't we start with that, Amanda? How did you end up in Washington? What were you doing? Give us a little bit of background on that.
Well, actually, the way I got into the administration was I was touring a movie because I'd gone to USC Film School, did a short to graduate, and I was touring that movie around film festivals. It was in like 40 different film festivals. This is when I was trying to go the normal Hollywood route, and I was like, the culture war is the only thing that matters. I was still very political, but I was trying to be I was going very like Andrew Breitbart, DC is downstream from Hollywood. So I was like, okay, I need to do culture war stuff. And I was kind of undercover. I mean, most people I knew that I was Republican, but so I'm touring this movie, and I had all this time off because I'd be 3 weeks traveling and then 3 weeks off. So I was kind of doing odds and ends. And I was getting so caught up in the election because it was 2016. I was with the president since the escalator speech. Like I was obsessed since like 2015. And then so I ended up joining the campaign as a volunteer. I would drive out to Vegas in my off weeks and just live in this crappy little motel and volunteer at the head office there in Nevada. And then as the election got closer and closer, they hired me and I started assisting the attorneys and doing the debates and like just doing all this. I just got sucked into it. And then somebody said to me, well, are you going to sign up to work in the administration when we win? And I was like, oh, don't be silly. They're not going to, who's going to let me in the government? I'm like, have you met me? That's not going to, no one's going to let me do that. Like, it's not what I thought. And they're like, no, that's what we need. We need people who have no experience in DC, but who believe in the president and the agenda and the mission and can bring something new to the table. And so I was like, okay, like that makes sense. And so I signed up. I got hired at first the inaugural committee, which is, the committee that plans the inauguration, which is like planning 10 Super Bowls in 1 month. It's really intense, but actually coming from a production background, it's kind of useful because you're used to planning big events with lots of moving parts. So then I did that. And then I got hired for the administration as an appointee at the State Department. And what I was doing at the State Department was actually, I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Content, which means I was making, we talked a little bit amongst ourselves about information warfare. So that's not exactly what we do. We tell the truth and we explain American policy and we explain the administration's policies. But I was in the head of the department that made the content that would explain to the foreign audience what we were doing in the United States. And that was an awesome job. And I think it went really well. I did that for three years, maybe 3.5. Yeah. So I was in the whole time. And then this movie kind of fatefully fell into my lap. And I realized, I was like, I think I'm the only person that can do this. I mean, not to, I'm not like tooting my own horn or whatever, but I don't think there's any other filmmakers in the administration I don't think that there's anybody else that has the background that I did. And so knowing the players that I did in this film, in the film based on Lee Smith's book, The Plot Against the President, same name. I saw it in manuscript form and I optioned it right away. And before it even came out, and it was a big bestseller, and it was just off and running from there.
Well, you do have background. Your family has background in film. So this isn't something totally off the wall for you. Like you said, you went to film school, but we got to talk a little bit about your dad, because I want the guys to know who are listening, the audience to know, and I want to have a special connection here. So tell the viewers who your dad is and what your sort of Hollywood lineage is here.
My dad's name is John Milius, and he was a really prolific writer in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He was also a director. He wrote Apocalypse Now, and he wrote and directed Red Dawn, Conan the Barbarian, The Wind and the Lion. He wrote Dirty Harry, and a scene. Well, the thing that a lot of people like is the USS Indianapolis scene in Jaws. For Steven Spielberg, which was pretty cool. And then he wrote Rome, which was the HBO series. And he just was, this was a time when you could be, he still had tension for being a conservative in Hollywood. This was not like no one noticed. Every single article about him is like crazy conservative, even though he was the most professional, prolific writer and an amazing director. They have to preface everything with, he's got guns, he was on the board of the NRA. They actually based the character Walter Sobchak on him in The Big Lebowski. And we didn't know that when we were growing up, kind of. We saw it, and my brothers and I were like, that is weirdly like Dad. Like, have you noticed that character is like, it's exactly like Dad. And then we found out that was because it was actually based on him.
That's incredible. So I am Gen X, square Gen X, and I remember Red Dawn. And first of all, I believe it's a piece of trivia. It may have been the first PG-13 movie ever released. I remember that. Yeah. And then, of course, the whole story is a group of kids rising up to defend the country from foreign invaders. And the rallying cry, Wolverines, is something that me and all my friends, we yelled out. We played the games in the backyard when kids still played, Cowboys and Indians or whatever. Let's go play guns. That's what we did. We played guns and we screamed out Wolverines, and we defended our neighborhood from the foreign invaders. And it was so great. So there is a little fanboy in me right now, just pleased that I'm connecting indirectly here with the energy and creator of that film. And what's interesting to note is like those movies had very strong masculine energy.
Yes.
And there is a dearth of masculine energy today. And in fact, me and my mission, my guys, my whole audience, Liminal Order, we really believe that masculinity may be the antidote to what is ailing this country today. And so there's a really nice sort of congruence here for me to talk to you, talk about your dad, talk about the masculine representations in the movies that he made. And then to think, actually, I was thinking just the other day, we need a Red Dawn today, something that is artistic, but is valuable, that tells a story, that rallies masculine energy and sort of nationalism and a sense of like we have to come together to fight something that's invading us, because we are being invaded right now. We're invaded by ideas, ideology. We're invaded by people in our own government that hate us, that want to end us, that don't want to see any masculine energy, don't want to see any masculine leadership. And so this is a really nice sort of context to understand now this film that you have made that really is outlining the threats that we are facing. And we're going to get into the content of the movie. But I'm also interested in sort of like, how did it happen? What was it like? When did you decide to make the movie? What was it like getting together the cast of characters, the production team, etc.? So, why don't you tell us just sort of how this came about so that we can understand, you're working in DC, working for state, all these people. Were you planning this the whole time? Tell us the genesis and the timeline, and really, guys want to know, how do you make a movie? Let's talk about it.
I mean, I don't advise doing it as quickly as we did because that's absolutely not the way you do it. Really quick on the dad thing for your guys. Hold on, wait. Here's my poster.
There it is. Right on.
It wasn't just for this show that sits there in a place. I always have that because really, I think you're right. That movie motivates the time period we're in now. We all do kind of need that that burst. That spirit. We've lost the American independent spirit in movies and music. Everything's completely corporate. Everything's washed down. Everything is really made for an international audience. That's the biggest problem, is that you've got China reviewing everything Hollywood does, which means it's never going to appeal exactly to Americans and to that spirit, that rebellious, independent spirit, which is really important. And they absolutely are trying to just kill masculinity in movies, which, by the way, is bad for both men and women, because there's no women don't want unmasculine men wandering around like whatever. I don't understand who this benefits, but it's not anybody. Right. And then also, weirdly, on that note, so right before I left film school, I know I was in film school, I was going to write this piece. I had this piece, and then I couldn't, the place I was going to run it didn't run it. But my dad never gets mentioned as this, but you know how these days they're obsessed with like women, tough women in film, and they always have some stupid character doing kung fu out of nowhere who's like beating up all the guys, and it's completely not believable, and it's just annoying, and the character's just really irritating and annoying, and there's nothing really like that likable about them. Funnily, my dad actually had the strongest female characters as well in his films. If you look at it, the girls in Red Dawn, they were freaked out and they complained, but eventually they picked up the guns and they fought alongside everybody else. And they were actually really cool and pretty badass. Yeah. And then you've got Valeria in Conan the Barbarian, who is probably the best female character ever. I mean, ever. And then you've also got in Wind in the Lion, there's Mrs. Petticaris, who's like, you know, she drives the guy nuts. She's super tough with a sword. She kills people, but it's not in this like annoying way. She's like an actual woman. It's an interesting thing. If I was going to stay in film, I would have done more with that. But anyway, sorry, on to your...
No, we can dig down on this for a second. You grew up in a filmmaking family. Did you know you were always going to get into film? I mean, you went to film school, but like, was that just a default choice? Were you excited about it?
I'm not good at it.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just by default. No, I can't. I have no other skills.
Doubtful.
No, but yeah, I was around it all the time, and so it's something you think about. It's like I used to say when they'd ask you, you know, blah blah blah, nepotism in Hollywood, whatever, and I'm like, nobody complains about nepotism in the coal mining industry, where they're like, your dad worked in the coal mine. How dare you? By the way, you got a really good job in the coal mine. And frankly, if my parents worked in coal mining, I would probably be like, you know, I mean, that's the likelihood of you doing what is around you is very high. So, you know, it's not like I'm like in the Coppolas or something where like their Goldfish came out with their directorial debut. I mean, everybody in that movie makes movies. It's insane. That family makes movies, but good for them. You know, they got a legacy. But it's like, of course, that's what I'm going to do because I'm around it. The time, well, as I said, at the time I thought I wouldn't do it is because the politics got so bad, and being right wing at all, like forget even being like a, you know, really big social conservative, which I don't really think I am. I think I'm more of like a political Trump conservative, right?
Yeah.
It's impossible. So I figured when I joined the administration that I had just kind of like threw a grenade into my career that I had just spent a lot of time cultivating and going to film school. And I was like, I can't do this. Like I have to join politics. It's too important. And then the fact that this movie landed, it really just all came together. It was like this fated thing. Even the people that I worked with, it was like a fated situation where I was like, I have to make this movie. Even if I didn't want to, I was like, I have to make this movie. Like I'm the only one that's going to be able to do this. Obviously not taking like all the credit, like the team did it. And it was, as I said, based on Lee Smith's book, who had the idea to base the story on people and their discovery of the Russiagate crimes, as opposed to just documents and declassified information and this kind of dry, like, breaking news kind of way. It was actually through these amazing characters. Like, that's the thing, is the people that discovered this: Devin Nunes, Kash Patel, Jack Langer, Rick Grinnell. Like, I mean, these people are just so vibrant and have such cool stories that I think that was really, that's what you can make a movie about.
Yeah. Yeah. So everything starts with a story. And if you got to have a good story and good characters and good arcs and interesting people. And you mentioned Cash. Cash was my favorite. He may be younger than me. So it's like this weird thing to like see somebody younger than me, but who's so wildly competent and successful. And like, but yet you can still hear it in their voice. And like some of the words, they're just like, wow, young people these days, like, they can really get some things done. I don't know how old the guy is, but I enjoyed his segments quite a bit because he seemed pretty fearless, and I loved what he did. And we're gonna get to all of that for sure. But interesting that you went to film school. What's that?
He steals the show.
Oh, he really did. Yeah.
Like he becomes the star, and I think he's what people really identify with for exactly what you're saying. A, he's not a known figure. You don't see him on Fox News every day. And B, he approaches this just like we all would approach it, which is, I picked up the dossier, I looked at it, and I was like, this is bullshit. Like, this is so obvious. Like, and he just does the obvious. And he's like, okay, well, we can prove this wrong really easily. Here's what we do. And because he's fearless, he's still fearless. I mean, the guy, he says, he's like, we just got to keep winning. And it's a totally great attitude to have.
Yeah, I felt some resonance with him because just like me, in my sort of media information career here, I've just started pulling on a string and ask questions. And man, but 10 years later, I'm still pulling on the same damn string, trying to figure out what's going on in our culture, what's going on in our politics. And he read this thing. He's like, this is stupid. We got to figure this out. There's simple questions we can ask. And he started to ask them, and especially of 65 people, which we're definitely going to get to, because that was a huge, unbelievable moment that I didn't necessarily know of. But again, we're going to push that down the road just a little bit. I just want to wrap this up, your context. You grew up in a Hollywood family. Your dad's wildly accomplished. He made movies that represent a certain perspective in politics and culture. And then you end up in the campaign. I did not know that you were there at the escalator. That's awesome.
Oh, I wasn't at the escalator, but I was on board.
On board at that time. Escalator time. Yeah. So you're on board very early, and then you come to DC, you do all of your DC work, you read this book, you're in manuscript form, and yeah, you are the perfect person to do it. You knew all of these people already. You run in all these same circles, and you understand the content, you understand the city, and you understand how to make a movie. So of course, is a very natural fit. It must have seemed like a very logical thing to do. And in fact, you're saying it's like you had no other choice. You were compelled. Yeah,
I mean, it seemed logical, except for the fact that I had a government job. Every day seemed like an emergency in the government, where I was like, I can't leave and go make a movie. I have to do, I got to do this, and this. Like, well, who will do it if I leave? And and you're just like, okay. Somebody explained it best to me, because I was freaking out. I was like, am I really going to leave and go start my own company and make a movie that's going to have me targeted by, I'm going to make enemies out of all of the people that tried to take down the president. Like, I'm like, that's kind of big. And as a friend of mine said to me, he was like, because I was like, should I do this? If I do this, I got to resign like really quick. And a friend of mine said, what are you going to do? You're going to spend the next year beating your head against a wall, arguing with bureaucrats, trying to change the phrasing of 2 or 3 sentences in like a UN statement, or are you going to go make a movie that could change the world? And I was like, well, okay. I was like, all right, I guess I should probably go try at least.
Yeah.
I didn't know if we were going to be able to do it. The timeline is insane. And it's hard to explain to people that don't make movies that you're like, you can't, there's certain things you can't, it's not about leisurely taking my time and thinking about it and having like artistic moments. You physically cannot make that many interviews edited together into something coherent that fast. The first cut of the movie was 4.5 hours long. We have 70 hours of footage. We did 35 interviews in a month and a half, which by the way is insane. And Yeah, so we'll probably release the long version, the 4.5 hour version, in like 8 little parts, like a series. We're probably going to do that on one of the platforms. That's coming soon. So that people can kind of dive into the section that they're most interested in, whether that's the investigation, the Flynn background, which I think is really interesting, the media stuff. I mean, each of these has their own place kind of in the story.
Yeah, indeed. There's several segments, but they're all tied together with the same basic theme. And the same basic theme is that the Democrats were afraid, they were scared, they didn't want Mike Flynn to come in. Mike knew where all the skeletons were. He was also operating on a very advanced level in terms of intelligence action and restructuring the way the intelligence network worked, which is very fourth generation warfare, where you push down intelligence analysis and decision making into the field, make intelligence distribution horizontal rather than vertical.
Well, you guys, intelligence has become an industry. Sorry, I told you I was going to jump in like crazy. Intelligence has become an industry, and that's the scariest thing, is not only are they disgustingly corrupt and need to be completely dissolved and rebuilt from scratch because there's no saving them, and that's how I feel. But they can come do whatever they want. Like, everyone's afraid of them. They're a bunch of pencil pushing dorks. Like, who cares? But the other thing is they've become an industry. Them and people frequently know about like the defense, the military industrial complexes, whatever you want to call it. But the intel industry is also ridiculous. And so when because we look at these, like what Flynn was trying to do, which is make it more immediate, actionable, which is actually what keeps us safe. Like, they always hide under this banner of like, but we're keeping America safe. And you're like, how is you being in my phone keeping America safe? I don't believe you anymore. Sorry. Like, you don't have my trust anymore. You lost it. And it's not, it's so what he was trying to do, and what we talked to KT McFarland, and who was his deputy, and people like Michael Anton, and his, a lot of people that he worked with, describing what he was going to do. Basically, he had the crime of thinking that they were too bloated and that we needed to cut down some of their positions. It's the same reason why the swamp is after Donald Trump. That's what I use Flynn as in the movie. Flynn is like a through line and a microcosm, an individual microcosm in a way, of the bigger picture of what they're trying to do to the whole administration and to Donald Trump and his ideas in general. Like, this town is so nasty if you try to shrink it. There is one thing you can't touch. I mean, it's like you can do all kinds of things, but if you try and shrink their stupid buildings and their ridiculously bloated programs, if you try and mess with that, they will come for you. It's like clockwork.
Well, what's beautiful about that is to see that Donald Trump delivered on his promise to cut out waste, abuse, and corruption. Okay, that's what every candidate says. It's something very easy to say. Like, I've said it when I got hired to be executive director of various organizations, CEO. It's like, yeah, we're going to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. It's a catchphrase. And then you find out that it's really hard to go after waste, fraud, and abuse, especially on these entrenched bureaucracies that have been around, have spanned multiple different administrations, hell, multiple different generations even. And when Trump first appointed his various cabinet members, they went out with the idea of shrinking the freaking government, man. State Department, you must know very well. The education.
Them, yeah. I mean, the problem is then you get in with, which now I can say, which is that a good portion of the people that are even in the administration, even at the highest levels, have zero interest in shrinking the government and are doing a terrible job at it. Some of them are doing okay and pretty great, and we that's great. But then you get this other situation, not to go too nutty on the bureaucracy thing, but I have PTSD from working in bureaucracy, I got to tell you. But so the other thing that happens is I noticed what they do is they find these lower level political appointees and they isolate them and they go, okay, this is like the highest, most shishi job this person's ever had. We're going to roll out the red carpet for them, give them an assistant, fly them around on the United States plane, take them all over the world and treat them like royalty at these embassies and roll out the carpet as though they're some important dignitary. And so many of these appointees, even if they're just kind of on the fence, like Bushies or your average kind of RNC person that comes in, if they're not hardcore MAGA, they come in and they see that and they're like, oh, I'm not actually going to cut this program because I want to go to Brussels and speak at the conference and stay at the nice hotel, and I'm part of the Atlantic Council now, and I'm doing cooperation with Europe and blah 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 blah. And you're just like, no, you're supposed to axe all of this. Like the fact that like I think I'm banned from the Atlantic Council headquarters because of what I did when I went there. But that's what you're supposed to do. If you're a Trump appointee and you're invited into the CFR, you messed up. Like you messed up. You're not helpful. You're not useful. They buy them off, or you get these Bushies that are just selling out the administration right and left. Like, don't even get me started. But yeah, it's really annoying.
So at least he tried a little bit.
Yes.
But what's interesting to hear you say, and this highlights a very difficult problem that we've been facing, is that not only Trump was elected as an insurgent, as a weapon to go in and disrupt the uniparty and the corporatists and the globalists, and we all know the story by now. And yet he's constantly battling internally his opposition within the government, deep state, entrenched bureaucrats, whatever you want to call it, the institutions. And now you're telling me that even of his appointees, of which it was troubled staffing, right? They couldn't staff up. But even of some of the appointees, and I know you've got some names in mind. We're not going to kill anybody today, but I know you know some people in mind, because I can see you like telling somebody's story as you're describing some general vague person.
I couldn't even pick just one. I mean,
and so we're learning now that then even the MAGA appointees, not really MAGA, and we have a bunch of mutual friends, some still in the administration, and we constantly are talking about like how many of us are there. And like, there's really not that many. So let me ask you a question. How many of us are there in the administration who actually have power to do things, to implement the agenda, or to advise Trump and his team on sort of the cutting edge ideas like 4G warfare and other things that we all know about? Like, is it smaller number than I think? Am I going to be terrified?
It's really small. I mean, to be fair, just to be a little bit balanced, I'd say that, I'm not Miss Everything. I wasn't interacting. I wasn't in the highest levels of this, that, or the other. I was in my lane. I was at State Department. I know State Department inside and out. I know the parts of the White House that I know, and a handful of the other agencies. Some agencies were better than others. Frequently, you'd hear about Commerce being like like if you were too MAGA for any other agency, they'd go hide you at Commerce. You'd be fine. But that all had to do with whoever the secretary was. The amount of us that there are, as in us, is very small. I used to say you could count it on one hand, because you've got a situation where once they figure out that you're actually MAGA, the people around will just stab you in the back and do anything to keep you from getting to like a higher position of power. I think the only reason that I survived being as fully MAGA as I was is because I'm the only person that could have done my job, again, because there are no other content creators in the administration. Who's gonna do my job? Who's gonna run content for the United States? Like what, some guy that's like done press releases for the Navy? Like bless him, but that's not gonna happen. Like, you don't know how to make videos and make things that are compelling and convince people of things. it doesn't exist. So I think I got lucky there and I landed in the position that I needed to be in. But it's at this point, I've been out for 6 months. What happened right before I went out is something really important, which is the PPO, which is Presidential Personnel Office, got really good. Like something happened and there was a shift, and suddenly the hiring got a lot better. And we got a lot more MAGA people in. So I have a feeling it's much better now. I think that was a change that happened a couple months before I had left. But that was in the last year. Again, we need another 4 years because our first term was spent battling imaginary Russians and Ukrainians or whatever. Battling one hoax after another, and filled with infiltrators, either Bushies or whatever. And what the Bushies do, which is what we always talk about in our world, we call it, the Bush League. They hire each other. So you get one of them in an agency, and like there's some that are okay. Like there's people I've known that work for senators or congressmen that I don't particularly like, but they're actually really good and they're totally MAGA and they're capable. But occasionally, actually quite a lot, you'll get these Bushies and they'll come in and they'll hire everybody else from the Bush administration. And you're like, you walk into an agency and you're like, what is this? Who are these people? They're like the architects of the Iraq War. And you're like, what are you doing in my State Department? Get out of here. Like it's so annoying. Like, I mean, to name names for a second, like how is Elliot Abrams in our administration? Like he's literally the neocon White Walker and he's running around running policy. Like, how is that a thing? And so you, as a lower level appointee, you're kind of like, you're trying your best. You're pushing the agenda forward every single day. And then you see stuff like that. And you're like, I am now fighting within my own administration to actually do the president's agenda. What the hell? So we need more time because of that and because of so many other things. It's like, I can't believe how many amazing things this administration has accomplished, considering how hamstrung at times we got behind the scenes and in front of the scenes with this onslaught of this absurd hoax, which was crazy from the moment it happened. I mean, I remember where I was when I first heard this idea of a Russia hoax. And like Devin says in the movie, I was like, this has to be a joke. No one could possibly think this is real. Like Russia, like, did they pull it out of a hat? They were just like, oh, we're going to pick Russia as like the thing. Like it made no sense. Actually, what Cernovich says, there's so much material we've had to cut out of the movie because it's, like I said, couldn't be 4.5 hours long, but there's this one great line that I wanted to keep in, but we'll put it in a promo or something where he's like, I wish the campaign was organized enough to have been able to collude with Russia. They couldn't even collude with themselves. He's like, they couldn't even collude with social media. Like they were not colluding with anybody. Like lucky they could collude with headquarters. Like it was,
Well, on my podcast a few episodes ago, Darren Beatty, he names names in State Department of some leftovers who, even from Obama administration, who are actively working to disrupt the election currently today. And it's all over the place. And it really does put some greater context in Trump's achievements when you realize, when the regular average citizen realizes that we didn't just elect him and he goes to Washington and all of a sudden he's got full control and he can implement his agenda and whatever. No, he barely even has a handful of personnel that he can trust within the entire freaking bureaucracy. And he's fighting from people within the freaking GOP, right? First off, and then not just within his own party, and then within the administration itself, within the bureaucracy, and then of course the Democrats and all of the collusion that they put together. They being the only ones that colluded, conspired, cooperated, or coordinated with anybody on this. And I think it's just classic. I interviewed Alexander Dugin the other day, and he was talking about how he had long advocated for Russia to support all the divisive elements within the United States, all of the racial antagonism, Antifa types, black bloc types, anything that they could do to sow discontent within the United States. Why? Because they didn't believe in the neocons policy and like the Reagan Cold War policy. And so they have been running information operations in the United States forever, right? Like literally forever. They were doing it before Trump ever got here. They're going to do it after Trump is long gone. And actually, they're the ones who had an interest in Hillary, disrupting things and supporting Black Lives Matter and all this stuff. So it seems to me to make sense. They're like, yeah, you guys are the ones that are colluding with Russia because we've actually also been listening to them too. Fascinating sort of dynamic going on there. One thing that really struck me when you started to introduce Obama was you called Obama, you said, or he said, or somebody said, he brought Chicago style politics to Washington, D.C. Now, can you explain what that means because I'm from Chicago. I know what that means. So can you explain what that means? Because I thought that was a very powerful line that kind of just got glossed over a little bit, but I think that's a great example. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the person who said that was actually Congressman Lee Zeldin, and we were talking in the context of the motivations behind Russiagate and related to the Flynn background a lot. So one of the things we're talking about is the preamble to the Flynn phone call, right? That people need to understand is there's two foreign policy related things that happened right before that phone call. One was a UN vote that the Obama administration allowed the United States to abstain from that condemned Israeli settlements. And you'll see that in the Trump administration, quite the opposite. The United States takes the exact opposite approach. It's very, very odd for America to have done that. The second one was in order to make the Russian collusion myth seem like it had teeth and seem real, Obama kicked out, a handful of Russian diplomats and made this whole big thing about that. And so what Lee was describing was related to the UN vote about Israel, and particularly as it related to the General Flynn's opposition to the Iran deal. Okay, so those are sort of your three floating foreign policy ideas that are behind there. What they did is talk about breaking with precedent for the United States. They basically did big foreign policy moves right before they left. The election had already happened, which is important, okay? So they were a lame duck few months. The election had already happened. It was during the transition period between Trump and Obama, and they did this huge foreign policy move to kick Israel in the face and to kickstart hopefully a new Cold War with Russia. So those are two very, very big foreign affairs moves to make on your way out the door. Usually you kind of leave things, you don't try to start new crap before the next administration comes in. And so what I think he was referring to there was both that style of, I would call it petty and disruptive. But the other thing he's referring to, which I think is probably what you're referring to, which I witnessed a lot when I worked in the campaign in Nevada, which is the massive corruption, which is the crazy pay for play. Politics is a business there. Everything is greasing hands, and you give me this and I'll make sure this person's employed and you get to run this company and I'm going to give you 10% of this. And oh, well, by the way, we hired your cousin. I mean, it is insane. And I've heard that Nevada and Chicago are the most corrupt political places, probably outside of, DC and Maryland. Just keep adding to it.
Right.
But I have to say, I that's what I took from it, his comment as well. And I saw that in Nevada, not to go on too much of a tangent, but it reminds me, because we're obviously about to have an election again. When I was in Nevada, just as like a lowly election campaign person looking out over the poll watchers and this and that, we had incidents where boxes of ballots, cars driving boxes of ballots, we would find parked in the middle of dirt parking lots, completely isolated, with the doors open and the lights on. And one of our poll watchers would be like, I was driving, you're supposed to be able to accompany the car that takes the ballots and the cartridges from the polling place to the clerk's office. This is what every campaign is allowed to do. And we'd have people calling us being like, first of all, I was in a car chase. They were trying to lose me, which is crazy. And then you'd have crazy stuff like that. I mean, and that's one example. All night long, we were writing down the wildest stories of like uniformed officers preventing our poll watchers from entering the clerk's office or to see the boxes be unloaded. Intimidation. I mean, crazy stuff. And I've heard that Nevada and Chicago are 1930s style corruption. Not
Definitely.
Even new corruption. It's like a silly gangster movie.
Totally. Clark County is totally full of corruption. In my book, Democrat to Deplorable, still available on Amazon.com, by the way, selling very well every month, more and more every month, as more people want to find out what really happened and why. In my book, I talked to a woman who worked for the Democratic National Committee in Nevada, and she was a Bernie supporter, and she was telling me in our interview that like Bernie's office got shot up like in the primaries. And I was like, that can't be right. And I did a little bit of research. And what do you know? It was right there in the newspaper. Like, just people shot bullets just into Bernie's headquarters in Clark County in Nevada. The whole caucus system in Nevada is totally rigged. Right. They stole it all from Bernie. They screwed all of the delegates. They blocked off the parking lots. They blocked off the entrances. They like started the meetings early, changed the rules, dragged things out. There was like a riot on the floor basically in Clark County and the caucuses because the outcome wasn't what it was supposed to have been. So you combine that with Chicago, where they say, you know, vote early, vote often, and everything there is about exactly bribes, which was uncovered, you know, many years ago, all throughout Chicago with the Daley family and everybody going on there. So it was just interesting to me, that comment. It touched me, being from Chicago, and it just adds to the milieu, right? That milieu of what Trump is walking into. He's walking into Obama and Chicago style politics. He's walking into, you know, the administration, his own administration that is fighting him, the GOP that is fighting him, everybody in town fighting him. And before he even gets there, they decide to unleash an information warfare operation. And I'm going to go on just a little bit of a tangent here, but then I want to dig into this concept because, look, people ask if there's a civil war afoot. People ask if there is going to be a conflict. I'm telling you, folks, we are already in the middle of that civil war. It's just that it doesn't look the way you expect it to look. Earlier generations of warfare involve people lining up across the field and shooting muskets at each other. Then eventually you're in like trenches with artillery. And then eventually you're with tanks moving very quickly and outmaneuvering people. But now it's everywhere. It's all encompassing. It's a moral level. It is on a mental level. It's on a physical, kinetic level. It happens in the media. It happens in your mind. It happens with information. And we're being controlled now through information and these information warfare operations, which interestingly enough, General Flynn knows plenty about. And here we are. We walk into this and they unleash what is perhaps, I mean, very effective, certainly very powerful, and totally egregious and disgusting operation that was unleashed on the American people. So let's put it in that frame, okay? Information warfare operation. This is what was kicked off. Let's take us through the story. Let's start getting into the meat of things. What is an information warfare operation? How did it get started here? And what are we talking? What are the moving parts? And how have Hillary, Obama, and the Democratic National Committee and the rest of them colluded? They're the collusion people. They're the conspirators. They're the ones that cooperated in all this to make this happen, these crimes, this hoax. Mm-hmm. Let's get into the mechanics. What is the main thrust here?
I mean, I think the best... There's a lot of people that speak about that exact thing in the film. And one person in particular is John Solomon. And he talks about how America itself. So you spoke about the fomenting of the fractures of American society that was taken advantage of earlier. The other aspect to that is that the United States itself has very advanced information warfare techniques. Obviously, there's things I certainly don't know. There's things that you know what I mean? Like it's clearly we're very good at this. What he talks about is that the tools that were used by NSA, CIA, State Department, DOD, et cetera, clearly were used against the American people here. And that's really scary. So now we're not only at risk from foreign governments, but basically certain parts of our own government, when they decide that we don't vote for the right person, are going to abuse the public with a 3 or 4 year long hoax, combined with a second hoax about Ukraine, combined with God only knows what now. I mean, they're doing the exact same thing that they were doing before now. The audacity of the FBI to do that unsourced leak, if that's what happened, about how Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation is the craziest thing. I mean, I can't even believe they have the audacity to do that after everyone already knows that the Russiagate thing was a hoax. I mean, I say that, but everybody doesn't know that. There's still plenty of people walking around thinking that the Trump administration campaign had anything to do with Russia. It's like, it's still a thing. They've won at it because basically it's so much easier to have a coup and to have warfare when it's information based, and they've been doing it for a really long time. Otherwise, you look at things like totalitarian countries where everybody's under control because of in your face fear, and it's like a more overt sense. But imagine how much easier it is to just pull a hoax over on everybody, put it out on the national, on the media. That's why I go after the media so much in this movie, is because none of this would have been possible without the media's being complicit. Like the CIA could have done whatever they want, FBI could have done whatever they want, but it wouldn't have worked on the entire public if the media wasn't out there pushing it, saying exactly what they were saying and lying to us every single day. And that's really dangerous. They've destroyed their own institutions. The information warfare aspect of it is, it's really the scariest part, because it's really hard to fight. It's really, you have to have, I mean, if it wasn't for, and again, another reason why I include people in the film like Mike Cernovich, Jack Posobiec, or journalists like John Solomon, people that got it right, because the mainstream media looks down their nose at them and poo-poos them and is like, oh, they're just these internet personalities. And you get these high and mighty ivory tower people that think they're the only ones that can write about foreign policy, and they're the only ones that can tell us the news. And they were wrong, and they've been wrong for 25 years. It's not new. They've always been wrong. So the idea that these voices exist, that's why they're clamping down on us so hard. That's why, the Twitter blackouts happen the way they do, shadow banning, the tech companies being the oligarchs that they are, working directly with China and shutting us all down. I mean, it's like America. It's, you know what it is? Bringing it back to Red Dawn.
Yes, Wolverines.
Wolverines. But that's what a lot of patriots thought the war was going to look like. And they were like, I'm ready. I got, I'm a prepper. I've got my stock. I've got my, I'm ready for the war when the war comes. I used to joke about that. I'd say, because, my mom is actually a really good, she's like a champion shotgun shooter, she's just like my dad. She's an actress. She's from Hollywood, but she's very, very pro-gun, very Republican. Anyway, so but like I was always like, oh God, when the war comes, my mom's going to be ready. She's like stockpiling water and got like the target practice and da. But that's what people thought it was going to look like. They thought it was going to look like Red Dawn. They thought we were going to be like taking positions behind rocks and firing at an incoming enemy or a government that was out of control. That's not what's going to happen. It's already happening. Just like what you said, they're just going to pull a hoax over on everybody. You're going to see it on your TV. The one guy actually, besides John Solomon, who's amazing on this issue, is Edward Dr. Lutwak, who he wrote the book Coup d'etat, and he explains how in a democracy, this is what a coup looks like. You don't see the kind of coup like you would see in Africa or places in South America where there's an opposing force that comes and takes over the palace, and then they show up on TV and they say, I'm the president now. That's not going to happen here. What they're going to do is you have your secret police, right? FBI, CIA, you get your secret police come out and they go, oh my gosh, we found, it turns out that the current leader is a foreign asset, and we have to remove him to save the whole country. And he really nails that, because that's exactly what happened. And thank God they didn't succeed. But that was information warfare. It was saying, oh my gosh, you guys happen to have elected, you bad Trump people, you elected a Russian asset. Imagine that. And you're like, no, we didn't. You just don't like it because we're going to shrink your stupid bureaucracy. And that's how nasty they are. I mean, it's unbelievable. But
right. It's amazing. It's amazing how much of it comes back to just protecting their money and protecting their position, their status, their power,
and discovering their crimes. That was the second thing. Was they're gonna do, if you threaten the intel agency's money, there's two things. They want their cushy jobs where they're unaccountable, and the second thing is you might find out things that they've done that make them look really, really, really bad, and other horrible lies that they've told us for the last God only knows how long, probably 40, 50 years. But so that's the other thing, is they've got and John O'Connor explains that really well, who was Deep Throat's lawyer, who from Watergate, which he's fantastic at explaining this, but he explains it in that it was a defensive and an offensive measure because they're getting us away from their budgets, so we don't mess with their bureaucracies, and they don't have to be accountable to anybody. And by the way, they have a lot of crimes to cover up. So of course they want to distract everybody with pretend other crimes in the Mueller investigation that discovered nothing except for the fact that we were all right.
Right.
But yeah, it's too prompt.
So this is why Mike Flynn became such a target, right? So Mike Flynn was former head of DIA. Mike Flynn is a sort of younger generation of general, one who understands fourth generation warfare, one who understands the way the intelligence information should flow. He not only knew the crimes, but he also had a different vision for the way that the military and intelligence structures of the United States should be structured. And that threatens big budgets. It threatens the big defense contractors because we don't really need a million guys with rifles on the ground. What we need are targeted operations, media operations, information operations, special operations stuff. It's a much smaller scale. And, he was going to change the way things worked. He had an idea. We talked about this with Michael Anton. And even in talking with Anton a few episodes ago, it just makes me really shake my head and just wish and wonder what would have happened if Anton and Flynn and Bannon even had stuck around and were able to continue on the road that they were on, the promises that were made to the American people. Trump did.
Flynn's people. They got chased out by McMaster. I mean, a lot of people, they were expecting me to go harder on McMaster in the movie, which if I had, again, there's only so much you can do in 90 minutes. I've made enemies out of everybody else. I could also add him to the list. But I mean, it's insane. Like the guy took Obama's policies, put them in a new binder, and then tried to pass them off as MAGA, as like America First Trump policies. And the people that were like, wait a second, this is not what we're supposed to be doing. This is stupid. He would chase out of the building and fire under the president's nose. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's everything.
We know some of those people. We saw it happen. I mean, it was insane. And then there was a moment, and I'm going to go back to information warfare here, but just a funny little tangent. There was a moment where McMaster was complaining about internet trolls and leaks and such. And we know who he was talking about.
Cernovich made him.
Yeah,
the best part is when the guy was like, he literally, do you know how many times I've heard major government officials walk? Can I say a bad word on this show?
You may.
Okay, so I have to check because I've been doing media. I'm trying to be good. So I've been walking around. I've been in so much, like more than once. I have heard very high level government officials say, "Who the fuck is Mike Cernovich?" Yeah. And at that moment, I'm sitting there and I'm like,
I don't know. Never met the guy.
It makes me so happy. I love it.
It's crazy. And so, people who do not know, there were sources and there was information, and Mike did a very good job of hammering on McMaster and calling out what they were doing to personnel and how he was derailing the Trump agenda, how he was interfering with hiring and putting the wrong people in the wrong spots. Mike had a hand in frustrating him and hopefully getting him out of there. That's very interesting. Yes, a couple other people too. Very symbiotic relationship between the MAGA new social media universe and the Trump administration. Jack Posobiec being one as well. Very powerful and influential in that regard. But back to the information warfare operation. The reason why it's so powerful is because the first mover in information generally wins. It's once you can put an idea in somebody's head and they're like, okay, that makes sense. Rachel Maddow told me. So yeah, makes sense. It is very, very difficult to dislodge it, no matter how many facts, no matter how much evidence, no matter what an intricate and thorough explanation you can give to somebody. It is an ego attachment. Because if you believe something, and you're like, okay, now I'm sort of ego invested in this belief.
Absolutely.
And then in order to get someone to let go of that is very difficult. So if you can even just get the most outrageous lie into somebody's head first, carving that thing out is damn near impossible.
Yeah, and the person has to think of themselves as wrong instead of the two pieces of information that are opposing are no longer neutral. where it's like one is this, one is that. It's that whatever one you attach yourself to first is you and it's correct. And then in order to even accept the other one, you have to accept that you were wrong, which everyone has a problem with. Yes. I'm told I have a problem with that.
I'm not so surprised, maybe.
I don't know why anyone would say that, but I've been told that I have a problem with being told that I'm wrong. So,
well, and so that's why people like that I interviewed for Democrat to Deplorable talking about political transitions, most all of them had to go through a traumatic experience, something where their belief of the world collided with the reality of the world and nothing added up. And you get to the point where you're just like, oh, I just need help. Like I'm ready for something new. And cognitive dissonance, exactly. So absent a traumatic experience is very difficult to dislodge an idea from somebody who has taken it in as their own. And so the speed by which, the comprehensive nature by which, the multi-pronged approach by which the Democrats and Hillary and Obama and all of them put these ideas out into the zeitgeist, pump them down our brains, in our ears, through the newspapers, through CNN, and basically was the first mover. And so from then, you're playing defense. You're playing defense from them. You're trying to chip away and chip away.
Yeah, we were playing defense the whole time. And not only that, they had the media, and they had the government. It's not like we walked into the administration and all of a sudden all the bureaucrats and everybody was like, oh, yay, you're here. What can we do? It was like, it was not like that. So you had situations where government officials, career government officials are sitting there going, well, you're telling me we're doing X, Y, and Z, but you're from the Trump administration and Trump is a foreign asset. So therefore, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just do my own thing. And by the way, I'm going to spend $2.6 billion on, this new app that identifies Trump people on Twitter as Russian trolls so that we can silence them. And you're sitting there and you're like, no, hang on a second. That's not reality. That's fucking crazy. And you're arguing with senior people. Do you know how dangerous that is, that they convinced people in the government that the president was a Russian asset and that the people that worked for him were compromised? That's a coup. That is a coup that was going on the entire time. I mean, that's what's so crazy. And so you're not just convincing the general public of this information warfare, which is bad enough, because then what does that do? Like, Cernovich actually says in the movie, foments violence, because these people can fight in the streets and that's okay because you're just fighting Russians. You're fighting Russian assets and Nazis and all this stuff like this. It's insane. It's dangerous. But then you're also looking at the government. So you've got your intel people, State Department people, regular bureaucrats all over in all the different agencies, second guessing everything about the administration because they're like, well, maybe they're just doing this because they're pleasing Putin. And you're like, that is the stupidest thing. You're like, it's so dumb, but yet so dangerous. You have to take it seriously. And it's like you said, it's impossible to pry the idea out of these people's minds. I mean, one of the reasons I made the film in the way that I did is because I feel like you would have a hard time arguing with it. There's a lot of conservative films can be very hyperbolic because conservatives are so tired of being silenced and so tired of not having a movie for them and so tired of never seeing their vision on the screen of what they know is true that I don't blame them for this, but a lot of times they can go really far in the hyperbole direction, right? Like you can throw in a couple of like soaring eagles with like America the Beautiful, and you could say anything like, and it's like, blah, like it's very preaching to the choir. I hope that I was able to do something that people can watch, and it's a very well argued movie. And there's, at first when I was doing it, I was like, okay, so we're making some points here that are very important to get across. And I would have 2 or 3 people or 4 people saying the exact same thing unprompted. I was in the room. This is what I saw. This is what happened. This is what the document said. And, you start cutting that down because that's though it's a strong argument, it's not the best way to put in a movie. But so I know that it's solid. And I think that comes across in the film. And I feel like people on the left, people that are skeptics, I think that they would have a hard time saying that this is hogwash because how are that many people lying? And the documents are there. I mean, anyway, not to go all over the place.
It's perfect, because you're right. The movie itself is not hyperbolic. It is not sensational. And you interview prime players, principal actors, people with access and the clearance and the experience and the act of actually reading the documents and putting their reputations on the line and persevering after all this time, months and months and years, and at putting themselves at personal risk, the slander and the libel and all the defamation and the bullshit that goes out about, when they don't have the facts. And this is what I was going to say to you, what they're going to do to you when they don't have the facts. They go after the messenger, and they're going to character assassination, and they're going to, and like with Cash and with Nunes and all these guys, they got slaughtered and they got attacked and people came after them. And when they do that, that's a very good sign that you have the facts.
That's what he says. He goes, isn't that great line that Cash has so many good one-liners in the movie. I swear to God, we're going to make T-shirts of him. But when he says, when the ass clowns in the media start shelling us, we know we're over the target.
That's exactly
and that is so true. I used to say that when I was at State Department, is I would literally run around and I'd be like, why am I not getting any hit pieces? I am so much more far out. Like, where's... Like all my friends were being called white supremacists and Nazis and silly, crazy people because they were, Miller ally does X and children are in cages and all this. And I'm like, I'm working on immigration policy as hard as I can. Why isn't anybody saying, where's my hit piece? But no, because I see it as a badge of honor. And I mean, why? That was the other thing in the beginning of the Trump administration. And this is, again, exemplified perfectly by what happened to Flynn. If you get a hit piece written about you in the Trump administration, there should be a 6-month period where you can't get fired, because otherwise the press is running your personnel office. And that's what happened for probably 2.5 years. I mean, at least until the new team came in. If the press wrote a hit piece about you, you'd get some really dorky head of an agency. They'll be like, yeah, the secretary really doesn't like all the heat and the bad press. And I'm like, well, then you're in the wrong administration, because guess what? The press isn't going to like you. And they fired so many good people that way. I mean, look what they did to Mari Stull, who was one of the most effective political appointees in the State Department. People don't know her name, but she basically stood up for us at the UN and elsewhere. Ambassador Moley, who's an amazing person. I mean, look at what happened in the White House. All the people that McMaster chased out. Darren Beatty is the best example of what was happening. Darren Beatty should have been preserved in that administration for life, not fired. So I mean, I was probably quite lucky that I didn't get attacked, because I knew I work in the press. I know how to fight, but I also am not afraid of the press. I'm friends with these people. I talk to them. I'm not, I can deal with it. But what I was telling somebody the other day is I was like, so what's going to happen is they do a handful of things. They either call you, if you're on the right and you're in the administration, you get there's a playbook. Playbook A is you're dumb, crazy, silly, not educated enough, or whatever, you're not qualified. Option B is you're a white supremacist or a Nazi. Option C is they'll frame you for a crime. So I'm going to go ahead with, I know it's going to be option A because they already started, and I'm fine with that. I'm like, at least they're not framing me for a crime, and at least they don't think I'm a Jewish Nazi. So then we're good. Like, whatever, if they want to say I have no education, they're totally right. I went to film school, and yet I had a very, very high position in the State Department, and they can fight me.
Hey, another Jewish Nazi. Welcome to the party. It's amazing. That's the same thing that happened to me. And it's a great point what Mike says.
Yes. No, what happened to you is interesting, because actually you're an interesting case. I've thought about this. I never got to tell you this, because you got treated like a government employee. I haven't seen a lot of non-government administration people get taken so to the woodshed by the press and by activists. It's weird because you've got, it's not like you're the only public MAGA guy. You've got Jack Posobiec, which of course they drag him through everything too. Mike, they do it to everybody. But I'm hard pressed to think of somebody who had really as much real world damage, which I always meant to mention. I don't understand that. It's very odd that they really saw you as somebody they needed to take out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, at the time I was definitely like a civilian. I was just hanging out. Yeah,
Yeah,
like, and by civilian I mean not even in the info war, right?
right.
Like my social media profile wasn't that large. I didn't do a show like this. I didn't have a podcast. Hadn't written a book. Nothing. I was just hanging out with Jack and Cassandra, and just do like we were just friends, And yeah, they came after me, and it's because of this environment that you're talking about, where they say that the Trump is a Russian asset. Well, actually, first they say it's Hitler. Then they say, oh shit, America voted for Hitler. So now we got to say something else. They cheated, right?
Yep.
So now they got to change the story. So now they cheated. He's a Russian asset. And so now they're all Nazis. They're all Russians. And anybody who helped Trump must be a Russian, must be a Nazi. So now it's open season on regular citizens like I was. And luckily for me, I took my beating. I got, fired. I got banned from Little League, the whole thing. But I decided to take all that energy, jujitsu that shit around, turn it into something positive. And here we are a few years later.
Now you got a bigger voice. Now look what they've done. See, that's what they do. They don't understand. If they don't kill you, which, if they don't actually take you out, you become bigger. I don't know why they don't understand this, because you have to do what you did. Everybody has to do. If they try to take you out, you have to go bigger. You have to just be like, okay, this is my career now, because otherwise they're just going to keep doing it. I mean, I said this in the administration too, where it was like, the one thing I would still say to the admin is your press people, your cabinet leaders, you have to protect these people from the hits from the press. If you are getting hit by the left-wing press, you're doing your job. If you're not, if they're fawning over you, then you've got a problem. You're not doing it right. Like the fact that foreign policy, I think they called me, it was really funny because it was conveniently, they dropped this article. They've never written about me the whole time I worked at the State Department, and it was like conveniently undoing their precious Iran deal. They didn't have a problem with me then, but then all of a sudden the movie's announced that it's going to come out. And that day, I mean, we pushed it a week, but that day, October 1st, they dropped this story calling me the most unimpressive person in the Trump administration, which I feel is a little hyperbolic. I mean, the most unimpressive? Really? Like, okay, but and you're just like, really? Like, that's what they do. So I realized they're going to go with silly for me. So,
discredit. And you bring up a very good point, actually. Look, we need to understand that we're not in a conventional warfare mode, and that the Trump administration and anyone that follows in him similar vein is actually leading basically an insurgency against the establishment in the midst of an information war, which means then that you need to have information artillery. You need to have information warfare coverage. You need to have like first aid for your information warriors. And like, how are you going to do that? By standing up for them, by sticking up for them, by running counter information operations, not just by being like, oh, we don't like the heat, you got to get out of here. That's actually a bunch of shit.
Or distancing yourself from people. Like when Darren got fired from the administration, a handful of us, I think it was the next day or a couple of days later, we greeted him at the local bar with a resounding applause. Stand by your people. A lot of people will distance themselves because they're like, oh shit, like this is the best job I ever had. Like I can't be associated with so-and-so. That is just cowardly. Like you cannot do that. You have to stand up for each other, and in social media and in the people that are speaking the MAGA agenda, people that are banned. That's the craziest thing to me. How are we not talking about the people that are banned? Do you know, like some of the most entertaining people from our movement are just gone. They're just memory hold, and no one talks about them. And you're supposed to pretend that they're like these, you're supposed to disavow them because Twitter decided that they weren't okay. I mean, it happens to everybody. That's the thing. A lot of people went after, they kind of made fun of Laura Loomer when she would talk about getting banned from Uber and all that stuff. Guess what? I got banned from Uber for life on this movie. I haven't heard about it happening to anybody else. They had some horseshit reason, like I didn't wear a mask for a block and a half or something. But this kind of stuff can happen to everybody. Like it's like everybody needs to just, you don't have to agree with the style of the person, but we all need to be banding together and standing up and not infighting.
And it's not just us sort of on the ground or the troops. It has to come from the top. So to be critical of the administration here, if we're in an information war, you have information warriors, you have information militias rising up. right? Like you can really think of like Sobek, Cernovich, myself, others as info militia, right? Because we're in a war, it's an insurgency, it's an info war. We have stepped up in the absence of federal power, and like, whoa, we need to be protected. And that's just by running cover and running counter ops, and especially for people that are in the administration. And that, along with some of the early hiring stuff, is part of, you know, a reasonable critique of the presidency. And you know, I think that there's been a lot of lessons learned over the last few years, and really, God willing, the second term will be one where they understand how to operate in Washington, can get some of the right people in place, and maybe start to affect a greater amount of change and implement the Trump America First agenda. Hopefully, we'll see. We don't know what's going to happen.
The real MAGA people in the positions that they ought to be in. Like we need what we actually, okay, here's another thing. What we need is all over the country, people have to, if they can, I know not everybody can, but this was how our country was built. You got to put down your tools, put down your business, put down your farm tools, whatever it is. And for the next term, you got to come to DC, you got to join the administration, and you have to do your time in government. Because right now, 99.9% of the people that work in government a lot of them are just totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but they're all Democrats. So you're already handicapping any Republican administration, because when a Democrat administration comes in, they're all moving downstream. They're all moving in the same direction. We don't have that. And you don't want people who have been living in Washington forever to be running the country. Like you can't have that. And so what I realized is, of course, I never wanted to work in government. I hate the government. I don't want to be in the government. So the fact that I got kind of, voluntold to join is that's a cashism too. I stole that one. Is great, but I didn't want to do that. Like I was not a 9-to-5 person. I'm creative. And so but that's so, it's so important. I say this to everybody, is it's like Republicans naturally are averse to or have an aversion to working in the government, because they're like, ugh, like I make money and be my own thing. Yes, that's true. The problem is you're just going to have overlords that don't understand that. So especially the younger people that are getting out of college, work in the government for Republican administration, give yourself 2 years. It could change your life. It could certainly help the country.
What's incredible, as a longtime resident of Washington, D.C., I will never forget how the city transformed when Obama was elected. Okay. When Obama was elected, all of a sudden there was just thousands upon thousands upon thousands of new people moved into the city, new government staffers, new NGO staffers, new lobbyists, new lawyers, new nonprofits, new think tank people, thousands, tens of thousands of people moved into the city, changed the entire tenor of the city, all new restaurants, all new clubs, changed everything. And then the Trump administration, nothing changed. I didn't notice anything. There's one place where we can hang out. We basically know all. Right. We know basically everybody that moved into DC for the administration. And so, that massive change wasn't there. But let's not get too critical right now, because we are at an important time in American history. We are but just a few weeks away from the election. We can spend some time critiquing the president after he wins re-election. Let's stay focused on the bad guys right now. And I want to just do like a real clinical discussion of the DNC, Fusion, Steele Dossier, FBI, CNN, FBI. Like, let's talk through that whole process right there.
Well, so I think I knew just enough about Russiagate to tell this movie in a way that people that don't know the whole detail could understand. And one of the things that was the most useful for me was when Cash and Nunes explained what Fusion GPS really is. When Nunes explains that it's a racketeering organization, it basically, what they do is you can pay them to use intel sources to dig up dirt on people. And by the way, everybody has dirt. So it's not like this is just to get dirt on politicians. It can be anybody. And then what they do is step one is publish that information in totally spun, slanted ways, whatever makes you look the worst. And ideally get people to lose their jobs, ruin their lives, whatever it is that they're doing that the client of Fusion GPS doesn't like, make them stop doing that. So there's that element to it. But they also had another element, which is what really crossed the line out of being, what do they call it in campaign? Whatever, the thing they do on politicians all the time. Anyways, opposition research. Sorry, my brain's going. But so besides being opposition research, they'll also feed it into the FBI. And that's what they were doing. That's why so many times people don't understand the Nellie Orr, Bruce Orr connection. Nellie Orr being at Fusion, being paid by Fusion GPS, and Bruce Orr being in the FBI, in DOJ, being able to feed that information into law enforcement. So not only do you have hit pieces coming out about you, but guess what? You're also framed for a crime. And that is, that's who these people are. That's who the DNC, through their lawyer, their attorney's office, Perkins Coie, and we explain this clearly in the doc, through them paying Fusion GPS to go use British intel to go harvest Russian disinformation, put it into the press, made out of whole cloth, and then also start an FBI investigation. That's why I'm so angry at the FBI and these agencies, because it's not like I'm just, I won't even get into exactly how I came to be a right-wing Republican kind of person, but it's not like InfoWars had nothing to do with it. But, I'm already, I've been paranoid about the intel agencies and about surveillance my whole life. Ask my parents, like I've been a little bit of a nut that way forever, but I didn't do this. I didn't tell them to become criminals. I didn't tell them to produce fake information on a candidate they didn't like and then create false investigations. The fact that they have no credibility and that most Americans hate them is their fault, not mine, not the president's, not anybody else. They ruined their own institutions. So yeah, sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but that tends to happen if you get me talking about I'm so mad at them and I'm so sick of being quiet about it. You know how like people are like, well, I think the intel agencies might have a few bad apples. And you're like, no, they're rotten from the core, just gone. And they're like, oh, like, who else says that is Putin? And you're like, oh, okay. Like, it's so ridiculous. But it's the Fusion GPS thing. The fact that they had anything to do with them is disgusting and criminal. And I wouldn't have faith in them to look into anything. I mean, look at what we don't know. We still have the largest shooting in American history, the Las Vegas massacre. We don't know anything about that, but we know imaginary things about the president and his associates that they didn't do regarding Russia.
PP tape. We know PP tape, but we don't know Las Vegas shooter.
Right.
I mean, that's right. The absurdity. That's what people mean.
It's just information warfare because there's no truth. You never get to hear anything real. You never have any real investigations. It's just all these agencies are, and the FBI is a tool to assault the public with fake information to control people and get them to vote for whoever, do whatever it is that their interests want.
Now we sound like crazy conspiracy theorists when we say this, but
it's not.
It's true. And you have tracked it. You've tracked the money from the DNC into Fusion, into the dossier, in the way that it goes to the FBI. Then it goes to CNN. They talk about it on CNN. Then the FBI is like, oh, they're talking about it on CNN. Now we have to have an investigation. And it's just one big, dirty, disgusting loop that starts with, right? Let's be totally clear.
Loop you're talking about, so the info laundering, so that's the other thing we try to explain. So what happens there is they can manufacture an investigation. So if there's a perfectly neutral person, the FBI, as we know, digs up dirt on everybody. They've been doing it since Hoover and before, and yada yada. That's what they do. So they leak something that's either true and spun or completely fake, and they leak it to one of their guys. who we all know who they are. Some of them have called me since I've made this movie. Hi, how are you? Go screw yourself. They leak it to a certain journalist that they've either planted at the New York Times or the Washington Post, or they just work very closely with. And they leak this whatever the nugget is, whatever their little prepackaged, either it's horseshit or it's real, but they give it to this journalist. The journalist writes a story based on the leaked information. Okay, so now we're at point 2. Then the story comes out, and then the FBI or the DOJ in one way or another uses this story to make a real investigation about the person, to get FISA warrants, which means warrants to spy on American citizens that you don't know. You know, there could be a FISA that we could all have them on us right now. We'd have no idea. So they get their little investigation going, and then they leak whatever results of such investigation or whatever they want to say about that. They leak that back to the Washington Post or the New York Times. And then the New York Times writes about, investigation about so-and-so. Person's reputation is ruined. They can't be hired. They can't work. If they're in public office, they're screwed. Like and all of that, by the way, everything I just described, there doesn't have to be one instance of truth in any of it.
There is no truth. There is only information. That was said on my podcast by Alexander Dugan the other day in this very context of information warfare, right? There is no truth. There is only information. There is only persuasion. The first mover wins in many cases because of our ego attachment to our beliefs.
Yeah. It's
very hard to carve these out. And then when you've got Jake Tapper, CNN, right there, you look at him. If you're a casual observer, you're like, this is the most credible man on TV, right? Jake Tapper. If you're just a regular person, right? And then there he is talking about the Steele dossier, talking about it with the former intelligence officials who are now out, who are now doing the rounds in the media to give it all credibility.
Work for the media. Nobody's paused and been like, they hired the people that lied to us for all this time. They're all working at different news organizations, and none of them have had to apologize. That's the crazy thing. If a right-leaning person made that big of a mistake, they would have to come out and say, okay, I made a mistake. I'm an idiot. Turns out there was no Russia collusion. Nobody's done that. These guys are still on TV. How does Rachel Maddow still have an audience? Like, what does she tell them? I'm sorry, I was lying the whole time. I couldn't actually find the smoking gun that I promised you night after night after night after night. Instead,
move on.
Show you some more pictures of Paul Manafort's suits. Like, what?
Right? They just move on. They just move on to the next thing, the next shiny thing, the next thing that gets their attention. That's going to be the new smoking gun, the new shocking evidence, this is the end of the Trump administration. How many times did we hear that?
Up. Remember that, where they were like, the walls are closing in?
Yeah, that's right. That's
so
right.
Good.
Every time. And I can't think back. I think back to when Trump, the emails were in question, and Trump was like, totally jokingly, he's like, hey, Russia, you got those emails? Send them over. Right. And then
their big secret communication.
Right.
He just did it out loud.
Right. Right. I read David Frum's book just to keep up with the opposition. Like seriously, like it is part of my job at this point. So I read Frum's book, and the whole thing is all about how Trump is corrupt and blah, 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 Russians, blah, blah. And the linchpin of his argument, his proof, is when Trump says, hey, Russia, you got them emails? Send them over. Like, that was the extent of the proof that he had. And I've been doing this little bit with Tim Pool sometimes when I'm on his show. We do, is it dumb or diabolical? Like, are these people stupid, or are they actually just malicious, negative evildoers? And honestly, I don't know. Is it a combination of both? I do know that whoever kicked off Hillary, the DNC, kicked off the Steele dossier and the whole thing, that's evil. There's no question.
Yeah, we know that was on purpose. You know who I have to get? John Solomon told me this story, and this is totally his discovery. And this is in his new book, which is that the Russia Gate story began. And I tried to keep this in the movie, but it's kind of complex. So part 2. But so they had the Hillary campaign had done a poll. about 6 months or so before the Russiagate story, before the end of the election, they'd done a poll to see what was Hillary's biggest weakness. And it wasn't Benghazi. It wasn't some of the things that they thought it would be. It was her reset button, her selling the uranium, and her perceived corruption with Russia. So what they decided to do was, no matter who the Republican nominee was, they were going to dirty them up with some kind of connection to Russia because it neutralized the playing field. And that is how the actual whole thing started. Because I always asked myself, I was like, why Russia? Like, why would you pick that? Like, there's so many. Like, if I had to put my hat on and be like, well, if I'm going to come up with something, like, they obviously tried the women thing. That didn't work. But the Russia thing specifically was actually to inoculate Hillary, who actually has a Russia problem, as we've all now seen, and certainly the entire DNC and the Bidens. But that was a really interesting piece of information. It's fairly complex, but they discovered this. They have that. They lay it out. John Solomon in his book. So that's a very that was pretty enlightening.
Yeah. And I think it also had a little bit to do with Syria, had a little bit to do with the oil and gas pipelines. And, it was very complicated, but actually made a very obvious choice for them to pick. And, I forget about that. I forget about Hillary's reset.
Right.
Who's colluding with Russia when you say, hey, let's just reset relations and start
also, how about this? How about, let's just use logic for a second and say, if Putin and the Russians really wanted Trump to win, why did they give Hillary dirt on Trump? Like, why was the dossier all about bad stuff about Trump? If you want the guy to win, why would you give that information to the opposing, to the candidate, the opposite candidate? And it's like the most obvious question in the world, and nobody asks it. There's so many things that have been memory hold and just twisted because of the info op that people aren't even questioning. I mean, the fact that the DNC wasn't hacked, it was Podesta's emails, for one, that you could only say that our, the Russians hacked our democracy if you equate John Podesta with our democracy. And a handful of other things that people just don't remember.
It's all just so absurd. And one of the most important parts to remember is that Russia and the United States, we do this too, all the time, everywhere, in every election, all around the world. We quote meddle. Mm-hmm. We have favorites. We help and support people. We have institutions. We have organs of the government. Oh man, the name is escaping me right now. Democratic National Initiative, DNI, I think it's called. They are spaced all over the world to help secure democracy. But we know what that means. It's to push the agenda, to push American agendas in Nicaragua and wherever the places, all over. So okay, so let's pretend for a second that those are actually legitimate and honest and are actually trying to push democracy. First of all, they're pushing democracy in places where democracy will not work because, I'm sorry, not every society is the same. And if you don't have the institutions or the culture to support democracy, like, you can rebuild Iraq as many times as you want, it's not going to work. But I can say that now because I don't work at the State Department. But I mean, we do all kinds of insane stuff. I mean, the stuff that about, we do plenty of things. And that's the other reason why I encourage everybody to work in government, because otherwise what's being done in your name as America may not be what you think it is. Like, your version of spreading freedom and democracy might look very different by the time it gets to whatever country it's being maneuvered in, than what you would think or hope. Right. So this idea that the Russian meddling in the election is either true or not, or new. It's not. It's like, it's just the game, dude. They have spies all over the country. Like, that's how it works. And we know that, and we work with them, and we're aware of who they are. And it's just part of the game. So all of this
compared to China. That's the other thing, is it took 2 years to get the entire national security apparatus on board with what the president said, which is an amazing accomplishment of his, by the way. Speaking of mentality changes, no one debates whether China is an adversary at this point. When the president was first campaigning, he would talk about China, and all the press would do is make fun of the way he said China, if you can imagine that. And it's like, now it's very obvious that this is our biggest adversary. And when the administration started, and I think this has been adjusted, but I'm not 100% sure. But when we started, China wasn't even called an adversary. And there's like this State Department code of like how you quantify all the terrible countries in the world, and and they would call China like a challenge or a competitor or something, and you're like, no, they're actually like they're our number one enemy. So like you might want to like update your stationery.
That was one of the number one things that I said that I was voting for Donald Trump. I wanted him to change the conversation around China. China is coming for us. They've been coming for us since
40 years.
Longer, since the Opium Wars. They're trying to get revenge on us. They're flooding our country with drugs the same way we and the Brits flooded their country with drugs in the last century. They have a long-term plan that operates on timescales that we cannot fathom.
That's the biggest with China is they operate on 100-year plans, and we cannot think more than 4 years in front of our face because we change. That's part of the deal. We change government every 4 years or every 8 years, and so the strategies. And this is one of the things when I was working in the policy planning part of the State Department. What my boss, Dr. Chiron Skinner, was trying to emphasize was that we need to be thinking long term against China. We need to not be thinking in these 4-year chunks. We need to be thinking 50 years out. And that's a really important thing that we need to be doing for our safety.
Yeah. There's been a lot of successes that get swept under the rug. The Russia thing was meant to distract all of us. It was meant to discredit. And let's get to the punchline. I want everyone to watch this movie, The Plot Against the President. First of all, let me just say, extremely well done. I mean, first rate, A+, looks professional. The story flows perfectly. The B-roll is tremendous. All of the post-production editing and work and graphics work first rate, first class. There's no questioning its professionalism or how well done it is. It's really, really well done. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I have to say I'm really happy with it. I'm amazed. It could have gone a different direction considering how fast we had to do it. Yeah. And the people that worked on it really pulled it and made it happen. I couldn't obviously have done it without them, and everybody felt honored to tell this story. And I think everybody knew that they were really taking part in a moment in history that really mattered, and were willing to do the crazy hours and pull it off. So I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, from the staff, from the production team to I don't know what you call people in a documentary, the stars, I don't know, the folks that were interviewed, the prime players, the principal actors, all of them with the same corroborating testimony to you, all the same stories, just tremendously well done. And I want everyone to go watch it at plotagainstthepresident.com/watch now. I believe it is on Vimeo. It's going to be on other outlets as well, but go get it. Yeah.
PATPmovie.com.
PATPmovie.com. Okay, good. PATPmovie.com. It'll definitely be in the show notes on here. Some of the comments are talking about Kash Patel. Kash Patel is fantastic. He was my favorite character because I had not ever really met him or heard of him before, and I loved his style and the matter of factness. So that's what I wanted to conclude here on. Let's conclude. Tell the story about Kash telling the story about the 65 principles.
Oh.
And the way that they asked them all the same question and the way that they all gave the same answer. And we can end on that so that everybody gets the main friggin' point here, which is go for it, Amanda. Explain.
The fact that this wasn't the way that Russiagate was pounded into our heads every day for 3 years. This point should be just as equally pounded into our heads, which is that Kash was on Nunez's team that did the investigation, that brought every single person who would have been involved in the heads of agencies in behind closed doors to ask them under oath. He asked every single person, he tells this perfectly in the documentary, asked every single person the same questions. Do you have any evidence that the Trump campaign either conspired, colluded, or
cooperated or coordinated, one of those,
with the Russian government, with anybody in the Russian government, anybody in the Trump campaign? And every single one of them said no. And we're talking about Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Loretta Lynch, Every single one, 65 people, they did 65 or more interviews. And all of that was what was classified for so long until the Nunes memo. And if you remember, a lot of people don't have time to like watch the news and track everything. The Nunes memo is what revealed that. And then beyond that, when Rick Grinnell declassified the actual transcripts of all of those interviews, they're there. They're all there right now. You can go spend your night reading them. You can go Google them and spend all night long reading James Comey's transcript talking about how he has no evidence of Russian collusion. And the fact that that is not on every single news channel blasting all the time. I mean, it wasn't not covered, but it wasn't covered in the way that it should be. And a lot of people can't connect the dots because unless you're like Catherine Herridge, you know, with the documents and everything, which she's amazing, but you know, and thank God Lee Smith, the author, put this together in that clear of a way. And thank God Devin Nunes and his team did this. And they asked those questions. And you hear Kash Patel talk about it when he talks about it. He's like, of course we asked those questions because that's what they were going out on the media every single night. And they were saying, we have seen evidence of Russian collusion. And he even says, he goes to Schiff and his staff and he's like, are you guys seeing something that we're not seeing? Because we're in the same hearing. We're in the same briefing. I'm not hearing this. What are you talking about? And then they would just go out on TV and lie about it. And the other, you know, so I recommend everybody watch it for that because it's extremely well put by Kash. The other thing that was interesting was Congressman Mike Turner, who explains this other very, very, very key point, which is if you go into a classified briefing and you walk out of and get classified information and you walk out of the classified briefing and you go to a bunch of reporters and you tell the truth about what you just heard, you have committed a crime. If you go out of the classified briefing and you get this classified information and you come out and you talk to a bunch of reporters and you lie about what you just heard and you tell a lie, you haven't committed a crime. So what he says is these reporters should seriously ask themselves, how often are these people coming out committing felonies about information? Why, like, it's just so the media was so in line to do this. They so conspired with these bad actors to push this hoax over on the American people for the last 3 years. And frankly, the last part of the thing that I'll say about it really is that what a lot of the folks say at the end of the movie, you know who benefited? Our adversaries. Like China and Russia couldn't have asked for a better situation to have the American president be doubted and for people to be fighting each other. The only winner in all of this was our adversaries. That's what they did.
Yeah, we've been distracted. We've been battling internecine war within our brothers and sisters in America, totally just stalling and obfuscating and ruining momentum and energy. And you're absolutely right. It's our foreign adversaries that win here. And it's, you know, one of the last points to mention about the press. I think that many of them were malicious. But I also think, again, many of them they came out of college, they get their indoctrination, come into the media, they get more indoctrination, then they believe the initial lie, then they're all ego invested in all these things. So they're actually just sort of like mentally incapable, like mentally and emotionally incapable of observing reality and reporting facts in a way that is even-handed. Everything that they see and do has to confirm for them their worldview that was injected into their brain on day one at college orientation about rape culture and about intersectionality and racism and evil and oppression and yada yada all the way through the process. And then you get out and you're 26, 27 and you're covering these things and it all lines up to all the notions that have been put in your head. And that's why this war is a total war. Mm-hmm. It is not just one presidential election or a conflict with Donald Trump. This is a total war. It starts at elementary school, middle school, high school, college, media, advertising, corporations, sporting events, libraries, media, everything everywhere is a battlefield. We've all been conscripted into this info war. It's everywhere all the time. They're coming at you, whether you want to participate or not. You don't have to have a uniform on. You don't have to be in the military. You are on the battlefield as it is. And it's in everything that we do. So this election right now is very important. I want Trump to win. Everybody go out there and vote for Trump, please, 100%. But like, it's not going to be over if he wins. And it's also not going to be over if he loses. This is something that's going to go on for probably decades. And one of the vectors that we need to fight back is media, but is film, is even art. So
yes.
My question for you, this is the last question, Amanda. What are you going to do next? What kind of art do you see in your future? What is your, I just got excited. What is your Red Dawn? What is going to be your big statement? Where are you going to go? You're an accomplished filmmaker now. You've got a great background. You're primed and ready. What are you going to do next?
Well, considering I just finished it like 15 days ago, I'm going to chill for a second and like get my hair done. But no, I agree. I mean, I didn't think I was going to go back into film. I really thought I was done with it. It was sort of a good feeling at a certain point to just be like, I don't have to do that again. But now I think I really, one cool thing that's really happened is my production company that I formed just to do this movie has a ton of new projects now on the horizon. There is a huge appetite for a cool, creative, unique, it's not just like it's like only right wing exactly. It's just not restricted and corporate and stupid.
Dissident.
It's dissident. Like I've tried to explain to people, I kind of want this production company to be like the A24 of the right, but not exactly just of the right. But basically, like Hollywood has kicked us out, and they don't have a stranglehold on taste. And if I think the other thing that I think worked out well in this and why I want to do this production company and kind of, I think I'm going to produce for a while before I direct again, because that was crazy. And I literally have nights where I was making this movie where I was like, I'm never doing anything like this again. This is insane. But no, I'm really interested in some of the projects that I'm producing under the 1AM DC company. And, there's just so much room for really, really good stories and for tasteful stories, and political documentaries don't have to be, a lot of times, I really like this. I like that there's a lot of films being made on the right. Of course, that's really important, and we all need to support each other, and there need to be more voices, not less. But a lot of times you find like an advocate of an issue who's like, I'm going to go make a movie about this now. But what we need are actual filmmakers who are trained and versed in filmmaking, who also happen to have open minds and make movies about the things that they care about. And I think a lot of it is the right has traditionally not been the home of art for some reason, because that's what the left told us. Because during that whole 80s and 90s period of time where they would say things like, oh, well, if you live in the suburbs, you can't be an artist, which some friends and I call it the Edward Scissorhands complex, where it's like, if you're unique and different, the suburbs don't like you, which is not they just created that. But so I think it's important for people to communicate that way. And like I said, I mean, Andrew Breitbart is really the person that nailed that, which is that Washington is downstream from Hollywood. You change culture before you change policy. And if we care about our culture, we really, really need to do that. And I think it's really important for more people to get in film. And I hope that my new little company can push a lot of things out, can put a lot more voices out on a lot of new different platforms.
Fantastic. 1 a.m. DC. I get it now. AM DC, 1 a.m. I get it. Very clever. Congratulations, Amanda. I loved the movie. It was sensational. I think it's going to be very well received. And when people from outside of this universe see it, it's going to be hard to dismiss what was in the movie. Congratulations. I know what it's like to give birth to a big creative project. And it's like, oh, it's time to chill for a little bit. Welcome back. Welcome back to the world again. And
hiding out. We took the whole crew and we hid in an undisclosed location. So I'm just happy to be back in the swamp to continue fighting it.
Nice. Tell everybody where they can get the movie.
Yes, the best place is follow us on Twitter, PATP Movie. Follow us on Instagram, same handle, and then also go to our website, which is PATP Plot Against the President, patitmovie.com. And we are constantly updating it with new platforms where you can see it. Right now, the best place is Vimeo on demand. You can see it on your TV, you can see it on your computer. There are 2 other platforms listed there that are free speech friendly streaming platforms, My Movies Plus and specialproject.io. So we want to support them. They just launched with this movie. And it's important to have platforms because guess what? It was also supposed to be out on Amazon 4 days ago. And conveniently, they've decided it needs a longer content review. And they're doing the exact same thing to Dinesh's movie. So it's not about time. It's not about size. I have a feeling like come November 5th, it'll be like, oh, the movie is allowed now. But so we'll be selling DVDs on our website. Go to our website. We also are in theaters. We're adding probably about 5 or 6 towns every week. So right now it's in about 6 all around the country. And we are not doing the coastal elites first. We are starting in Heartland America and going out. So tweet at us if you want it in your town. Tweet at everybody who you think needs to see it. Let's get it out there. Thank you so much for having me on. I love your podcast, and I'm so happy I got to be on it.
Thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate it. I loved your movie. I'm so glad I got to talk to you about it. Guys, I'm Jack Murphy. Hit subscribe here on YouTube on this new channel. I just started putting out videos this month, and the response has been tremendous. Please hit subscribe here. Follow me on Twitter at Jack Murphy Live. Get the book, Democrats is Deplorable. Also, hey, keep in mind, I'm going to be on Tim Pool again next Wednesday, and then also an election night special on Timcast IRL. So check that out as well. Thank you, Amanda. Can't wait to see you again. And congratulations. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.